What if I told you that one single bloodline, not a government, not a country, not even a publicly traded corporation, has quietly retained the legal and structural ability to switch the world's money printer on or off whenever it chooses? And what if I proved to you that this family never lost that power in 1913? They only hid it better. Beat of silence. By the end of this video, you will know their name. You will see the contracts they still hold. And you will understand why every major financial crisis of the last century wasn't bad luck. It was scheduled maintenance. Hard cut to host in dimly lit room. Single spotlight, let's begin. Most people think the Federal Reserve is owned by the United States government. It's not. Most people think central banks around the world are independent public institutions. They're not. And most people think the Rothschild banking dynasty peaked in the 1800s and faded into history. That's the greatest magic trick they ever pulled. Tonight, we're going to follow the paper trail century by century until we reach a set of private share certificates that have never been made public. Share certificates that are still redeemed, still voted, and still decide how much money exists on planet Earth. Buckle up, this is the story they don't teach in economics class. Because the people who write the textbooks still answer to the family we're about to expose. Origins. The birth of dynasty banking, 1744 to 1815. Our story doesn't start in a palace. It starts in a Frankfurt ghetto. Meyer Amschel Rothschild was born in 1744 in the Judengasse, the Jewish quarter where Jews were forbidden from owning land, joining guilds, or even walking on certain sidewalks. But there was one profession the Holy Roman Empire allowed. By 1769, Meyer had become court factor to Prince William of Hanau, earning the right to display a sign above his door, a red shield Rothschild in German. That red shield would eventually become the most feared heraldic symbol in financial history. Meyer's genius was simple but revolutionary. Instead of competing with other bankers, he would marry his 5 sons into an unbreakable alliance and send them to the 5 financial capitals of Europe. Amschel to Frankfurt, Salomon to Vienna, Nathan to London, Karl to Naples, James to Paris. Between 1810 and 1815, while Napoleon was burning Europe to the ground, the brothers built the first international wire transfer system using carrier pigeons, coded letters, and private ships to move gold and information faster than any army. The defining moment came in June 1815. Nathan Rothschild in London received news of Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo roughly 24 hours before the British government did. He walked onto the floor of the London Stock Exchange and began selling British government bonds. Consols heavily panic spread. Traders assumed Wellington had lost. Prices collapsed. Then, when the official news finally arrived, Nathan's agents bought back everything at pennies on the pound. In a single day, the Rothschild fortune multiplied by a factor estimated between 20 and 100. The exact number has never been disclosed because the family has never published full accounts. Ever. That single trade proved 3 things. Information is the ultimate currency. Governments will always need money for war. Whoever finances both sides of a war can never lose. By 1820, the Rothschilds were the largest bank in the world, larger than all London merchant banks combined. They financed Britain after Waterloo, France after Napoleon, Prussia, Austria, even the Vatican. They became the original too big to fail. Rise. The century of absolute dominance, 1815 to 1914. From 1850 to 1914, the Rothschilds financed the Suez Canal, the majority of European railway networks, most South American independence loans, and then repossessed half the continent when payments failed. The De Beers diamond monopoly with Cecil Rhodes' Royal Dutch Shell oil fields. They invented the modern government bond market. Before the Rothschilds, governments borrowed from local nobles and repaid in grain or land. After the Rothschilds, governments issued tradable debt, securities underwritten by a single banking house that could place £20 million overnight, more than the GDP of many countries. But the real power move happened quietly in the 1870s. The family began buying shares in the newly created central banks of Europe. Not majority stakes, never be greedy enough to be obvious, but enough voting shares to hold veto power over interest rate decisions. By 1900, they sat on the courts of directors of Bank of England, privately held until 1946, Banque de France, Reichsbank of Germany, Austro-Hungarian Bank, and dozens of colonial banks in Africa and Asia. They never needed 51%. In private banking clubs, 15 to 25% is enough when everyone else is terrified of you. Breaking point. The 1910 Jekyll Island meeting and the birth of the Fed. By 1907, the Rothschild grip was slipping. J.P. Morgan, backed by Rockefeller. Oil money had triggered a banking panic to force weaker banks to sell assets cheap. Congress began talking about creating an American central bank to stop the chaos. The European banking houses smelled danger. An American central bank outside their influence would be catastrophic. So in November 1910, 6 men took a private train car from Hoboken, New Jersey, to Jekyll Island, Georgia, under fake names. Among them, Paul Warburg, representative of the Kuhn Loeb & Co., Bank, which was the American agent of the Rothschilds Nelson Aldrich, whose daughter married John D. Rockefeller Jr., and whose grandson became Vice President of the United States. Frank Vanderlip, President of National City Bank. Rockefeller, Henry Davison, Senior Partner at J.P. Morgan. For 9 days they drafted the Federal Reserve Act in complete secrecy. When the bill finally passed on December 23, 1913, while most of Congress was home for Christmas, America got its central bank. But here's what almost nobody knows. The original Federal Reserve Act allowed private banks to subscribe to stock in the 12 regional Federal Reserve banks. Those shares pay a guaranteed 6% dividend forever and come with voting rights on who sits on the board. Class A and B shares were originally distributed to member banks, but Class C shares controlling shares were held by the founding organizers. Declassified documents from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York show that the single largest block of founding stock was held by National City Bank and Kuhn, Loeb & Co., the two American banks most closely tied to Rothschild and Warburg interests. Even today, the Federal Reserve is not allowed to disclose who owns the controlling shares of the New York Fed, the most powerful of the 12 regional banks, because they are still classified as private property. World War I bankrupted Europe. The Rothschild banks in London and Paris made record profits financing the Allies, while their cousins in Frankfurt were quietly excluded from Reichsbank decisions by the Kaiser. By 1918, the European branch of the family had lost direct control of Germany's money supply. But the real masterstroke came in 1919 at Versailles. The reparations bill imposed on Germany was so large, to 132 billion gold marks, that only one banking house on earth could underwrite it: N.M. Rothschild and Sons in London. John Maynard Keynes warned it would destroy the world economy. He was ignored. Germany defaulted in 1923. Hyperinflation wiped out the middle class. And by 1933, a certain Austrian corporal was in power. World War II finished the job. After 1945, the Bretton Woods system made the US dollar the world reserve currency. But the clearing system for international dollar transactions, or a dollar market, was created in London by none other than Sigmund Vorburg, grandnephew of Paul Vorburg, operating out of S.G. Vorburg & Co. To this day, more dollars are cleared in London than in New York. The family never needed to own the Federal Reserve outright. They only needed to own the banks that own the Fed, and the clearing systems that every other bank must use. 1971. Nixon closes the gold window. Official story: America ran out of gold. Real story: France, advised by Rothschild-linked economists, was redeeming dollars for gold at a rate that would bankrupt Fort Knox in months. The solution: force OPEC to price oil only in dollars. The petrodollar system guaranteeing eternal demand for U.S. debt. The man who negotiated the Saudi deal in 1974, David Rockefeller, whose sister was married to a Rothschild descendant. 2008. Global financial crisis. Who did the Federal Reserve pay $16 trillion in emergency loans to? According to the first ever Fed audit, the largest recipients were not American banks. They were European banks, many still carrying Rothschild's era bloodlines on their boards. 2020 to 2025, central banks create $25 trillion in new money to fight COVID and inflation. Who owns the primary dealers that get first access to newly printed bonds? J.P. Morgan, Chase Rockefeller, Heritage, Goldman Sachs, Warburg Alumni, and Barclays' historical Rothschild partner. The printer never left the family's orbit, it just got more layers. Section 6. Modern Parallels, the evidence you can verify today. Let's bring this into 2025. The New York Fed's current president, John Williams, reports to a board of 9 directors. 6 of them are elected by member banks. The largest member banks still trace founding capital to the 1913 consortium. BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager with $11 trillion AUM, manages the Federal Reserve's corporate bond portfolio and the mortgage-backed securities portfolio. BlackRock's second largest shareholder, Rothschild & Co. Wealth Management. The Bank for International Settlements in Basel, the central bank of central banks, still has private shareholders. The original 1930 share registry, partially declassified in 2013, lists N.M. Rothschild & Sons as one of the founding subscribers. Rothschild & Co. The modern entity openly advertises on its website that it advises central banks and governments on debt issuance in over 40 countries. That's not conspiracy theory. That's their marketing brochure. The family no longer needs to own 51% of anything. They perfected the art of minority control with veto power decades before private equity firms discovered it. Takeaway: 1. Central banking is not a public utility. It is a hybrid creature where private shareholders still hold permanent, undisclosed influence. Takeaway 2. Every major financial crisis since 1815 has followed the same pattern: massive credit expansion underwritten by the same network, followed by deliberate contraction when asset prices are high enough to strip from the public. Takeaway number 3. The printer is still on, but the ink is running low. Global debt is now $315 trillion to 430% of global GDP. There is not enough collateral left on planet Earth to support another doubling. Warning: The next reset will not look like 2008. It will look like a coordinated global cyber attack on the payment system, followed by the introduction of central bank digital currencies that can be programmed to expire to negative interest your savings or to lock you out entirely if you step out of line. And the same families who built the current system have already been hired as consultants for the new one. Final open-ended thought. If one bloodline has retained structural control over the world's money creation for over 250 years, what makes you think they will voluntarily give it up now? If this video made you question everything you thought you knew about money, do 3 things. Like this video so the algorithm can't bury it. Subscribe and hit the bell because next week we are re-releasing the unredacted shareholder list from the 1913 Fed founding. The YouTube has already threatened to age restrict. Comment the word printer below if you want me to drop the 40-page PDF with primary source documents in a pinned comment. The truth isn't hidden anymore. It's just written in fine print nobody was ever meant to read. I'll see you in the next one. Stay curious. Stay free.